Recently, I started poking at a question that I have heard a million times and have vaguely known the answer to my entire life. Why does Michigan have two peninsulas? Like, the lower and upper peninsulas are separated by miles of water. They're only connected by a bridge. Meanwhile, the upper peninsula shares some 200 miles of land border with Wisconsin. So why isn't the UP part of Wisconsin? Or maybe a better question, why isn't the upper peninsula its own state? The answer, oddly enough, lies in the city of Toledo, Ohio, and that one time Michigan and Ohio went to war. I've known the basics of this story most of my life, but the details are more interesting and funny than what I learned in 3rd grade. So if you already know the gist of the Toledo War, this story is still for you. And if you don't, get ready for some shenanigans. So once upon a time in the late 1700s, the US was working to divide up the Northwest Territory, a section of land that included most of the Great Lakes region. The land was mainly inhabited by indigenous nations, but the US had been given the land by the British after the Revolutionary War. As part of organizing this land, the government drew a line that started at the southern tip of Lake Michigan and then ran east until it hit Lake Erie, and they called this line the border between the Michigan and Ohio territories. So about 15 years later, when Ohio drafted its constitution and became a state, that's also the boundary they used. The problem was the map used to draw that border wasn't accurate. Around this time, surveyors realized that the bottom of Lake Michigan was actually farther south than a previous map had reported, and if you drew a line east starting from that point, you sliced off the northern part of Ohio. It wasn't a huge slice, but it was still 450 square miles, or about 1% of Ohio. But maybe more importantly, that land also included the mouth of what's now called the Maumee River, as well as the land that would eventually become the city of Toledo, where Ohio was already at work building a major shipping canal. Now, like you'd expect, Ohio maintained that this strip of land was still theirs, just like it said in their state constitution. And Michigan maintained that the land was actually theirs, since the border of the Michigan Territory was supposed to start at the end of Lake Michigan. Now, for a while, this discrepancy wasn't actually a major deal. Michigan just kind of took control over the region, and Ohio more or less just shrugged and turned away. It wasn't until nearly 30 years later that the so-called Toledo Strip became a big deal, because in the early 1830s, Michigan was finally ready to apply to become a state, and officially take that land for themselves. And this is where the Netflix-worthy drama starts. The first problem here was power. In the 1830s, Ohio was already a state, which meant they had representatives in Congress and just generally a voice in federal affairs. Meanwhile, as a territory, Michigan did have representation, but it wasn't officially recognized by the federal government. So Ohio had the louder voice, and they started lobbying against Michigan's statehood, basically trying to strong-arm either Michigan or Congress into just giving them the Toledo Strip, which went pretty poorly. Like, Governor Lucas of Ohio wouldn't negotiate with Michigan about this. So in response, Michigan passed what was called the Pains and Penalties Act, where they would slap heavy fines on anyone from Ohio trying to exert government authority in the Toledo Strip. Meanwhile, over in Washington, President Andrew Jackson was watching the situation get more and more tense, and he eventually went, okay, what to do. Attorney General, you are a trusted advisor. What do you think I should do in this situation? Well, Mr. President, I think the situation seems pretty clear. I'm gonna have to side with Michigan on this one. Sure, but here's the thing. It is an election year, Michigan can't vote, and could really use those electoral votes from Ohio, so... And that's how delegates showed up in the Midwest and tried to shut the whole thing down, which, in summary, did not work. Michigan continued to go hard on the Pains and Penalties Act, Ohio continued to have none of it, and eventually this led to the so-called Toledo War. If you're not a fan of war strategy and bloodshed, neither am I, but there was almost none of that in the Toledo War. On the Michigan side, the fight was led by the territorial governor, a 23-year-old named Stevens T. Mason, but really, the fighting just involved a lot of saber rattling. Like, a few times a Michigan militia showed up in Ohio, but the gist of it is that they captured a few people, fired a few shots over people's heads, and that That was more or less it. Nobody died, and there was only one notable injury when somebody from Ohio stabbed a Michigan sheriff with a penknife. If you're curious, the sheriff was Joseph Wood, and the offender's name was Two Stickney. And yes, I'm not even making this up. His brother's name was One Stickney. Also, not to linger on Andrew Jackson for too long, but when the 1836 presidential election rolled around, he didn't even get the electoral votes from Ohio, so there's that. Now, in all of this, where does the Upper Peninsula come in? Well, in 1835, when this whole scuffle was going down, the vast majority of the Upper Peninsula was not part of Michigan. The Michigan Territory included part of the Eastern UP, but from what I can tell, the rest of it was just the Northwest Territory. And the Wisconsin Territory didn't officially exist yet, so they were completely out of the picture. So to try and settle this whole Toledo thing, Congress tried to use this land as a bargaining chip. In 1836, they approached Michigan like, okay, look, if you just drop the Toledo Strip and give it to Ohio, we will let you become a state. We will even throw in the Western Upper Peninsula as a little gift. However, Michigan was, not thrilled about this. There are multiple reports that go along the lines of, the Western Upper Peninsula is just rocks and trees and wilderness. Why would we want that? But then, came the money. Later in 1836, the US Treasury realized that they had a surplus of money, so they decided to divvy it up and give it to the states. And only the states. Cue Michigan looking around and going, well, yeah, we're kind of broke. We could really use the cash. And so Michigan accepted the federal government's offer on December 14th, 1836, and officially became a state the following year. Ohio got to keep Toledo and the Toledo Strip, and in exchange, Michigan got the Western Upper Peninsula and all of its rocks and trees and wilderness, which, for the record, turned out to include billions of pounds of copper, extensive iron deposits, and a whole lot of highly valuable white pine trees. And, you know, it goes without saying that Michigan got a lot more than just industrial opportunities. I think that the land and water in the Upper Peninsula is some of the most beautiful in the United States. But, you know, I also live here. Overall, this is one of those stories that just made me laugh. I've known the gist of it for a long time, but I never knew about details like Michigan's 23-year-old territorial governor or 1 and 2 Stickney. Who names their kids 1 and 2? They are literally thing 1 and thing 2. But welcome to research, I guess. You never know what you're gonna find. If you are in the market for some fun Michigan-themed stickers, I've still got a few stacks of these left in my Etsy shop. I've got a Petoskey stone, a little camping sticker, a waterfall, and also this very cute jug of Michigan apple cider. The stickers are all super durable and waterproof. I've got one on my water bottle. And overall, I've been thrilled with these. You can find the stickers at etsy.com/shop/AlexisJDahl, or you can just click the link in the description. One way or another, thanks for being here. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you learned something that makes you think about the world just a bit differently, and I'll see you soon.